Your Humanities Half-hour is brought to you by the Northern Marianas Humanities Council.
Hapadays and Tiro, welcome to Your Humanities Half-hour. I'm Catherine Perry. Our guest today is the winner of the 2019 Attorney General Cup Speech Competition. He's a senior at Carmel School. Justin Ocampo, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
This year's topic for the Attorney General Cup competition was Public Law 20-66, the Taulamwaar Sensible CNMI Cannabis Act of 2018. Is it a cure or is it a curse? Pretty heavy topic. What made you decide to compete this year?
Well, I auditioned last year, and even though I didn't get to speak, I also got the opportunity to help last year's speaker as part of our speechwriting team. And it's just an overall great experience that I knew I wanted to be a part of, not just to be around people that I knew had opinions that could address this topic, but also just to address it in general.
So what was the process for you coming up with your speech?
We had people who were previously part of my school's mock trial team, and also people who are in our current advanced placement government and politics class. And we just sort of came together, presented both the cons and the pros of marijuana, and then as the research process went on, we just began writing, putting our research together, and that's sort of how our stance kind of came along, which is we're regardless of where you are, pro or anti marijuana, now that it's legal, what can we do for the Commonwealth? And the answer, well, for us at least, stricter regulations, considering that the youth is a huge part of our population, and the effect that marijuana will have on them is something that should be considered.
So how do you feel going through the preparation process and the actual competition has affected you as a person, either in your opinion about this particular topic or in general?
It's definitely affected my opinion on the topic, because when we first got the topic, people were like, oh, it's are you pro or are you against? But as we started to read more into it, it's not really whether or not you're pro or against, but regardless of your stance, what suggestions do you have for the Commonwealth, and will this benefit us or will this hurt us? So I used to be someone who used to have a very kind of hands-off stance on marijuana. If you want to do it, good for you. But now that I know all this neuroscience research about it, I'm a bit more, someone who wants the people in charge to have more of a hands-on stance on marijuana, at least get involved, at least know the side effects, and not just consider all the good things like they actually have.
So Public Law 20-66 was actually enacted in September 2018, and it legalizes both the medicinal and recreational use of marijuana in the CNMI. What do you feel is the real benefit of having young people your age look into this topic and present that topic in a public setting like the Attorney General's Cup provides?
A very fresh perspective that can only be seen through our lens, because I feel like people who think about this law, they're thinking not just the Commonwealth now, but how the Commonwealth should be in the future. And that's a very important stance for our opinions to be heard in. that didn't really make sense.
It's important to listen to the younger generation, that's for sure, because eventually this will all be yours, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. What are your plans for the future, and how do you feel this experience is going to help you achieve those goals?
Oh, well, I plan to go to film school in Hawaii, and although it's not the same thing as, public speaking or public service, I hope to one day spread these same kind of messages of awareness, but through a different, more creative medium. Yeah.
Well, coming from Mount Carmel School with its theater production and all that, I think creative is probably in your blood to some extent. So I can see that happening. You mentioned that one of the things that you would like to have come from this cup is not just for it to have been done and awarded and put on Facebook, by the way, for those of you that are interested in seeing all the presentations, but you think there's a real opportunity for policymakers to learn also from what you guys have done.
Yes. As I mentioned in my speech, there was a lot of debate about Public Law 20-66, except in the CNMI, because most people presented it as a good thing. But my research team and I and my coach, we all came together and we found all of these neurological effects on people my age who could experience these things, especially since, marijuana is being grown, it's legal. Either way, illegal or legal, they could still somehow find access to it. So, with that there, and with those side effects present as a possible thing that could happen to someone like me, I just want to make sure that the people and the leaders in general who are making this law know that as the Cannabis Commission continues to formulate their regulations on marijuana.
So it's almost like your speech, or maybe also including the other speeches, could be something of a resource, quick read resource, compilation of what you guys have found, some of the pros and cons.
Yes.
Before we listen to your speech, which I'm so happy to share with our listeners today, is there anybody you'd like to recognize or give thanks to in helping you achieve your victory this year?
Yes. I would like to thank my coach, Galvin De Leon Guerrero, and also congratulate him on his recent graduation from USC. Congratulations, Dr. G. And I would also like to thank my speech writing team for being the best. I couldn't have done it without you guys. And my mom and the entire Mount Carmel School family, thank you for your support and thank you for your prayers.
All right. Well, let's listen now to the winner of the 2019 Attorney General's Cup speech competition, Justin Ocampo.
In Greek mythology, the story of Icarus is well known. Trapped on the island of Crete, he tried to escape by flying away on wings made of wax. However, he flew too close to the sun, which melted his wings, plunging him to his death below. What killed Icarus was something the Greeks called hubris, an overweening pride and confidence in one's abilities. It is something we, here in the CNMI, are all too often guilty of, for we too have a bad habit of, pardon the pun, flying too high. Our history is full of industries cursed by hubris, a poker industry run amok, a garment industry whose abuses led to federalization, and a casino industry that is falling apart as we speak. Now, we are presented with another industry and another choice. Will we, again, fly too close to the sun with the cannabis industry? Or will we stay more grounded by effectively regulating it? Today's question asks us whether the cannabis industry is a cure or a curse. Well, I, for one, believe that it is not a magic cure for all our problems. But we can take steps to make sure it's not another curse either. To support this perspective, I will discuss three main points. First, I will address the federal implications of Public Law 20-66. Second, I will examine regulations from other states that can guide us. Third and last, I will argue that the harms of cannabis outweigh its benefits, which further underscores the need for effective regulation. To begin with, while cannabis has been legalized in several places, it is still prohibited under federal law. However, under President Obama, the U.S. Justice Department issued the Cole Memorandum, which stated that given its limited resources, the department would not enforce federal laws against marijuana in states that have legalized it. And while the previous Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, indicated that he would rescind the Cole Memorandum, the current Attorney General, William Barr, has made it clear that he will not rescind it. As Barr testified before the U.S. Senate, I do not intend to go after parties who have relied on the Cole Memorandum. So, with the federal government unlikely to intervene, it is even more imperative that we take ownership of this industry and effectively regulate it. This brings me to my second point. Moving forward, what can we learn from states that have legalized cannabis? To answer this question, let us examine two areas of regulation: manufacturing and distribution. In California, cannabis goods must undergo stringent laboratory tests to ensure that they are safe for consumers. However, Public Law 20-66 makes such laboratory testing optional, not mandatory. And in Oregon, residential ownership of marijuana is limited to 6 plants per household, while the CNMI law allows microproducers up to 25 plants per household. It is clear that we must adopt stricter controls on the quality and quantity of marijuana that can be manufactured. But we must also adopt stricter controls on the distribution of marijuana. Aware of this, in his transmittal letter for Public Law 20-66, Governor Ralph Torres expressed concern that the CNMI lacked enough resources to prevent the illegal distribution of marijuana, especially since the current law would allow medicinal use in government buildings and even in schools. Perhaps, then, we can look at Washington State, where distribution is confined to specific zones that must be 1,000 feet away from schools, parks, and other public places. But will that be enough to prevent the abuse of marijuana? This brings me to my third and final point. We must take a closer look at the impact that this drug may have in our community. There has been considerable debate about this very issue, except here in the CNMI. When Public Law 20-66 was introduced, most testimonials supported the bill, pointing to all the medical and economic benefits of marijuana, while downplaying its negative impacts. Sadly, though, of the 64 testimonials delivered, only 2 spoke out against it: Father Ken Heasel and the Board of Education. What's worse is that not one single testimonial offered credible research about how harmful cannabis can be on adolescent neurology. And that research is extensive, rigorous, and downright horrific. Neuroscience has revealed that the delicate nature of adolescence makes it a time when teens are most vulnerable to psychological conditions like depression, anxiety, and addiction. And no matter what its proponents say, cannabis is addictive, especially for teens. In a study conducted by the National Institute on Drug Abuse, researchers found that 1 in 6 teenagers who use it become addicted over time. A study conducted by Columbia University found that the use of addictive substances during adolescence interferes with brain development and increases the risk of serious mental health conditions. And in another study published in the American Journal of Psychiatry, the impact of cannabis use among teens can include delayed neural development, cognitive impairment, and a whole range of brain deficits. So, the science is clear. Adolescent use of cannabis can have long-lasting effects on their brains. And while regulations prohibit teens from using marijuana, the experience of states that have legalized it offers a cautionary tale, where teen use has increased rather than decreased. After Oregon legalized cannabis, officials found that 62% of 11th graders reported having easier access to marijuana than cigarettes. After Washington legalized cannabis, the American Medical Association reported that marijuana use among 8th and 10th graders increased at a rate that was twice the national average. And after cannabis was legalized in Colorado, a state-sponsored report found that teen use of marijuana increased by 20% and was 74% higher than the national average. As the Columbia University study noted, with the spreading legalization of cannabis, adolescents live more and more in a permissive culture in which substance use is considered normal behavior rather than a considerable health risk. And that is the problem with CNMI Public Law 20-66. By legalizing marijuana, we are normalizing it. And just as the normalization of betel nut and cigarettes led to epidemics of oral and lung cancer, the normalization of marijuana could lead to an epidemic of impaired cognitive development for life. The question, then, is how do we prevent this epidemic? I have 3 suggestions. First, to protect teens from exposure to marijuana, the CNMI should ban it from all residences in public areas where minors can be present, and strictly limit it to specific locations, like hashish lounges or medical treatment facilities. Second, all fees generated from this industry should be earmarked for the public school system, the Division of Youth Services, and the Community Guidance Center to help them address the harmful impacts of cannabis, especially on teens. Third and last, we should mount an aggressive anti-cannabis media campaign, similar to the anti-tobacco campaign of the early 2000s, to curb its use among teens and, yes, even among adults. Because kids do what you do, not what you tell them to do. And the less that adults use marijuana, the less that teens will use it as well. These are just some steps we can take to regulate an industry that will honestly be almost impossible to regulate. And while it is unfortunate that this industry was legalized in the first place, the least we can do is minimize its harms on our community. Earlier, I told you the story of Icarus. What I didn't tell you was the story of his father, Daedalus. You see, Icarus was escaping a labyrinth that his father had designed. And those wings made of wax, his father made those too. And while Icarus was carried away by hubris, let us not forget the hubris of his father, who was responsible for both the labyrinth that imprisoned his son and the wings that he flew on. Likewise, past and current leaders of the Commonwealth have designed the labyrinth of failed industries that currently imprison us. And as they prepare to lift our economy on the wings of yet another industry, they must temper their ambition with humility, wisdom, and prudence. For just as Daedalus is equally responsible for the fate of his son, so too are the Commonwealth's leaders responsible for the fate of the next generation, whose future lies in their hands. For our sake, please take good care of that future, and don't let it burn. Thank you.
Did you know that you can donate up to $5,000 to the Humanities Council through the CNMI Education Tax Credit Program? Donations from individuals and corporations qualify and can be used to offset your local wage and salary tax, BGRT, and earnings tax. Call our office at 235-4785 to see how you can support humanities programs in our community and obtain a tax credit for your donation. Sizuus Maasi, Olomai, and thank you.
Welcome back to your Humanities Half-hour. Today we're featuring the first and second place winners in the 2019 CNMI Attorney General's Cup. And joining us for the second half of our show is Lanz Jabez Victoria, who won second place from Grace Christian Academy. What made you decide to join the Attorney General's Cup?
Well, I've always been interested in speech, politics. I've been a member of the National Speech and Debate Association, and I've competed here on island and in the States for our nationals team. And when I heard that this year's topic was on marijuana, I have several friends that have been affected by marijuana or are currently using marijuana, and I felt like, I needed to give, not just myself, not just my own opinion, but my peers, give a voice to my peers on how we feel about the subject. So, yeah.
How do you feel being a part of this has changed you either as a young person with an opinion on this topic or in general?
Well, for one thing, my joining this competition basically turned my whole stance on marijuana around. I spoke about this a bit in my speech, but originally, I had not intended to make my speech be focus on the full legalization of marijuana because I'd always believed that marijuana is a danger to the self and subsequently to the community as a whole, to public safety. But after joining the competition, doing more research, drafting my speech, I finally came to the conclusion that marijuana isn't that bad. So now that's really how I feel. But I guess more personally, I am much more, how do I say this? I feel like, going up there on that stage and, like basically being myself really helped me, feel more outgoing. Like I'm not really as anxious of, showing who I really am to, people. Yeah.
What is it you hope people who listen to your speech or heard it on the day will walk away with after they hear what it is you had to share?
Well, what I hoped is that they would walk away with the knowledge that no opinion is set in stone. Opinions can change, like mine did. And I also want them to walk away with the knowledge that, even among my peers, our opinions are not a monolith. Adults, no offense to you guys, but a lot of times you guys think that, teenagers, we all think the same thing, do the same things, believe in the same things, but that's just not the case. And that's what I want the people who walk away from my speech, who are mostly adults, to be aware of.
So what are you taking from this experience as you look to your future and what it is you would still like to accomplish in high school or even looking forward ahead to college or beyond?
I've mentioned already that the speech made me feel much more comfortable to, show my true self to other people. And I feel like that would greatly aid me once I, pass through the education system and go into the adult world. So that I won't have to put up a facade, a fake Jabez, a fake Lanz. I think that would aid me quite a bit in, making friends, making connections, and basically just progressing through adult life.
Is there anybody you'd like to thank or acknowledge for helping you?
Oh, yes, definitely. I'd love to thank and acknowledge my principal, Miss Beth. Without her, I wouldn't have without her, I wouldn't have even been in the AG Cup, but also Miss Beth I ran a lot of my ideas through Miss Beth. I just wanted to see what she felt about some of the ideas I had, and she actually helped me shave off a lot of the more how do I put this, not as intelligent aspects of my speech that I had intended to talk about, but upon further observation with Miss Beth, turned out to not be very intelligent.
But I'm sure they were pretty fun or funny based on your personality.
I guess I'm not sure. I didn't have the chance to say it, but yeah. I'd also like to thank Miss Julie and Miss Susan. They also aided me in drafting my speech. I also ran a lot of my ideas through them. Miss Julie also really helped me a lot with delivery. So that I wouldn't just sound like all monotonous or something like that. And I'd also like to thank my friend Louis Zhang. He was the former GCA representative for the AG Cup last year. And, I actually had I wasn't exactly sure how the AG Cup worked when I first got in, so I really bombarded my friend with questions. And without him, without his advice, and without the knowledge that I gained from him, I don't think I would have gotten this far.
Well, we want to listen to an excerpt of your speech, but any final thoughts before we go?
Any final thoughts? Yes, I would like to say that in the course of drafting my speech, in the course of delivery, I looked out to the audience. And I looked at my mom, I looked at Miss Beth, I looked at Miss Julie, I looked at Pastor Ray, the GCA head pastor. And I recognized, prior to giving my speech, that my opinion ran contrary to what they felt about marijuana. But at the end, they were so proud of me, and they were still happy that I won, and they still respected my opinion, and that's really great. And if anything, a lot of my peers feel very scared of stating what they really feel about certain topics because they don't want to offend, the adults around them, like their parents or their teachers or their counselors. But I want to say that you shouldn't be afraid of, speaking about what you believe. Because if those adults around you really do respect you, then they're going to respect your opinions too. So, yeah.
And now we'll have the speech of Lanz Jabez, Victoria.
Don't worry about a thing. Sing with me. 'Cause every little thing is gonna be alright. I see you, Glee Club. Don't worry about a thing. I hear you. 'Cause every little thing is gonna be alright. Yeah. Okay. Guess no one else likes Bob Marley. That's fine. Okay, anyways. Reggae singer and peace advocate Bob Marley once stated, "Every man got a right to decide his own destiny." And on September 21st, 2018, the CNMI did just that, when Governor Ralph Torres signed the Taulamwaar Sensible CNMI Cannabis Act into law. This act, which provided for the legalization and regulation of marijuana here in the CNMI, was passed nearly unanimously in the legislature. Yet, concern over the ramifications of the law still exists, with many asking the question, will marijuana be a cure or curse for the CNMI? After I had been chosen to represent my school for the AG Cup, I naturally had to tell my parents. They were quite pleased at first, but when I mentioned that this year's topic was on marijuana, oh boy, they went into full battle ready mode. I mean, our little dinner table basically turned into General Douglas MacArthur's strategy room. Like, listen, statistics were brought up, opinions raised, talking points strategized, all pointing to the formulation of a speech advocating for the prohibition of marijuana. And that was the speech that I had fully expected myself to write. You see, I'd been raised in a conservative Filipino household. And if you know anything about Filipino culture, you'd know that we absolutely abhor drugs. Just listen to any of President Duterte's speeches. You'll get the point. Additionally, going to a Christian school only reinforced my preconceived notions on the iniquity of using marijuana. So imagine my surprise when I started finding myself agreeing more and more with the arguments that supporters of recreational cannabis make. When I informed my mother of this new opinion, she was displeased, to say the least. However, no amount of displeasure or persuasion on the part of my mother would keep me from stating my own opinion on marijuana legalization. Marijuana has been essentially illegal in the United States ever since the 1930s. And in the nearly 90 years of pot being illegal, prohibition has been a near total waste. For one thing, it's a waste of time. According to a National Institute of Health survey, marijuana use among adults has nearly quadrupled over the past 2 decades, despite marijuana being illegal. Additionally, it's a waste of resources that could be put to better use elsewhere. For instance, in the last 10 years, there were about 8.2 million marijuana-related arrests. And of those arrests, 88% were guilty of only the simple possession of marijuana. Now, this had the unfortunate side effect of filling our prisons with non-violent offenders, which contributed to animosity against law enforcement and an overburdening of our prison system. All this for a drug that's been wildly overhyped in terms of danger. Think about it this way. Heroin overdoses cause 15,000 deaths each year, while marijuana causes none. This for both drugs that are actually in the same criminal classification under federal law. And although marijuana-related DUI incidents have not been unheard of, they are magnitudes dwarfed by car accidents caused by alcohol, which is a completely legal substance. But the case of marijuana on our islands goes beyond statistics, and a more individual aspect of marijuana was needed. One of the ways that I did this was by communicating with some of my peers and friends that use marijuana. Doing so opened my eyes to an issue that I was simply not aware of prior to conducting my research. This issue is the expanding prevalence of marijuana abuse among my peers. Allow me to give an example. I have a friend who uses marijuana, and I asked her about how many people she knew that were also marijuana users. Her answer? More than 30. And of those 30, only 5 were not high schoolers. When I asked her if she knew why those guys were using marijuana, I mean, there must be a reason, she said she knew of less than 10 that used it just for kicks. The overwhelming majority, including, I suspect, her, used it as a way to escape. They utilized cannabis as a coping mechanism to distract themselves from the rigors and stress of their daily lives.
Today we've heard from the 2 top place winners in the 2019 CNMI Attorney General's Cup. Justin Ocampo, the first place winner from Mount Carmel, and Lanz Jabez Victoria, the second place winner from Grace Christian Academy. We hope you've enjoyed hearing their thoughts as young people speaking on the recent CNMI cannabis law passed. This has been your Humanities Half-hour. I'm Catherine Perry.
This program was supported by a We the People grant awarded to the Northern Marianas Humanities Council from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily represent those of the National Endowment for the Humanities or the Northern Marianas Humanities Council.